Hello, hello, and welcome everybody. Hello to our virtual viewers. My name is Lainey Rose Reiser, and I am the events coordinator here at East City Bookshop. It is a delight to be with you all this evening of festive queer holiday cheer. Thank you so much for joining us both in person and virtually through our live stream. We love the accessibility that virtual events provide, but we are delighted to be able to welcome so many of you back to the store to participate face to face. First up, some housekeeping details before we get into the show itself. Number one, we appreciate you wearing your mask while you're seated at the event and in the signing line. Masks are optional while shopping and browsing, but we've elected to continue to ask for them while we're seated closely together for an extended period of time. So thank you for doing your part. Number two, if you need a restroom, it is upstairs, past the cash registers and the greeting cards. Number three, if you're watching from home and experiencing any technical difficulties, please let us know in the chat. My colleague Emma is monitoring and can help if necessary. And please let us know in the chat where you're tuning in from and what you're excited about. We would still love to hear from you. Number four, we will have time for questions tonight for both our in-person and virtual attendees. So even if you're watching via Zoom, you can participate. Please put those questions in the Q&A feature so that Emma will see them and can ask them on your behalf. And finally, and most importantly, if you need to purchase a copy of your Mean One Matthew Prince, The Holiday Trap, Never Been Kissed, or The Charm Offensive, we have copies available and we'd be glad to help you out. All copies that are in the store have already been signed, but if you would like to have them personalized, we will have a personalization signing line after the show. You can also pre-order at the store Kiss Her Once for Me, Alison's November release, and check out our website for more details about our very exciting pre-order campaign that we're doing. And now the reason that we're here for the evening. When Timothy first told me about his new book, Your Mean One Matthew Prince, I was over the moon. Not only did I love his debut novel, Never Been Kissed, but I am a Christmas gay. I love all things merry and bright and making the Yuletide gay. And the more I learned about the book, the more excited about it I became. Matthew Prince is a young, rich, and thoroughly spoiled young man. So what if his parents barely remember he exists and the press is totally obsessed with him? He's on top of the world. But one major PR misstep later, and Matthew is cut off and shipped away to spend the holidays in his grandparents' charming small-town hellscape. It's bad enough he's stuck in some festive winter wonderland. It's even worse that he has to share space with Hector Martinez, an obnoxiously attractive local who's unimpressed with anything and everything Matthew does. Just when it looks like the holiday season is bringing nothing but heated squabbles, the charity gala loses its coordinator and Matthew steps in as a saintly act to get home early on good behavior, with Hector as his maddening +1. But even a Grinch can't resist the unexpected joy of found family, and in the end, the forced proximity and infectious holiday cheer might be enough to make a lonely prince's heart grow 3 sizes this year. Sign me up, I'm sold, I'm so invested in it. Another reason we're particularly excited for this event is that prior to this year, there weren't that many queer holiday rom-coms out there. And I am absolutely thrilled that this holiday season, we are going to be delightfully drowning in holiday romances. And so this event, we are thrilled to welcome 3 of those authors tonight with their books, all of which are sure to make your heart grow 3 sizes. Thank you for the amount of puns I was able to fit into this speech. Timothy Janovsky is a queer multidisciplinary storyteller from New Jersey. He holds a degree in theater and dance from Muhlenberg College. His work as a humor writer has been featured on Points in Case, The Broadway Beat, and Well-Mannered Grump, and his fiction short story debut was published by Voyage YA Journal. When he's not daydreaming about a young Hugh Grant, he's writing the queer rom-coms he wished he had as a teenager. Alison Cochrun is a former high school English teacher and a current writer of queer love stories, including her debut novel, The Charm Offensive. She lives in Oregon with her giant dog and a vast collection of brightly colored books. Roan Parrish is gradually attempting to write love stories in every genre. When not writing, she can usually be found cutting her friend's hair, meandering through whatever city she's in while listening to torch songs and melodic death metal, or cooking overly elaborate meals. She loves bonfires, winter beaches, minor chord harmonies, and self-tattooing. Those are the authors for the evening. Please give them a warm welcome as we welcome them all to tonight's Making the Yuletide Gay.
Hello. Perfect.
Hello. Yeah.
Nice. Thank you so much for being here in the rain. So good to see you all. I think we're going to actually start with a little like warm-up game to get everybody comfy. And including the folks who are watching from home. So if you want to participate in the chat, that would be awesome. All right, take it away, Roan.
Yeah, we're going to do a little either or. So you can just raise your hand on the either or. If you're here in the chat, put it in the chat if you're virtual. Yeah. Okay. So we're in the world of holiday romance here. So everything, think holiday romance. Okay. Do you prefer like an awkward Christmas Carol fail meet cute, or a very sweet like small business, oh my gosh, stars in your eyes meet cute? So A is awkward caroling meet cute. B is cute small business meet cute.
Okay. All right. So we raise our hand if we're
Yeah,
awkward Carol.
All right.
Heck
A.
yes. Give me all the awkward.
Okay. B.
Okay.
All right.
I think that's a pretty even
Yeah.
split. Some people don't like singing, I guess.
Okay. Well,
Okay.
I don't like singing, but I would
You would
rather.
carol.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Horribly. Sure.
Maybe it's also because I phrased it as horribly awkward first.
Yeah.
I kind of swayed.
That was
people
the draw for me. That was the
Same.
appeal. So
Failed harmonizing can really bring people together.
Yeah.
That's true.
Okay. So mine, I feel like was a hot topic among us. So A is, if you were to have your favorite wintertime beverage, would you want hot chocolate or eggnog? So A, hot chocolate. All right. That is a lot of people.
Fairly
B,
unanimous.
eggnog. Okay. There is some eggnog fans in here.
It's mostly me and my sister, actually. So
I think
Hello.
Heather would be disappointed to know that obviously in You're a Mean One, Matthew Prince, there is some eggnog. It wouldn't be a holiday rom-com without eggnog. And I was blithely unaware that you don't drink eggnog hot.
Yeah.
I would not have thought that. Why in the
I
winter time would we have a cold beverage? I don't know. The copy editor had a really good time with me. She was like, I don't know if you've ever had eggnog. I was like, you would be correct.
Perfect. Oh, okay. My question. So as in terms of tropes, would you prefer like snowed in as a trope, or like saving the small town or saving a small town business? Think every Hallmark movie. All right. So snowed in. All right. Nice. And then saving the small town business.
I'm sorry.
Fantastic.
We are in an independent bookstore. How dare you?
The outrage.
I know. They're like, I'd rather make out under the mistletoe.
I mean, there's something about forced proximity, right? Like you just,
Yeah.
it's amazing.
I feel like I had to pick the second one though, because I feel like both of my books have
Save the
small business, save
Yeah.
the small business.
You're actually very into like the small business motif. Like as I was reading Matthew Prince, I was like, so much of it was advocating for small businesses in Wind River. And I was like, oh, I want to know more about this. Like, yeah. Like, so I guess I'll take it back.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Matthew Prince.
Sure.
So in your acknowledgements, you tell a little bit of the story that like you were 16 when you came up with the idea for this book, which I just find amazing, during a trip to the Berkshires. Give us like the rest of your publishing story, because I know it's all interesting actually.
Yeah. So the first part of that is that when I was 16, you're doing a little look-see. When I was 16, my best friend and a group of our friends went to the Berkshires to visit her grandmother's cabin. It was very remote. It was on a body of water. It was on a hill. I mean, it was gorgeous. And I remember immediately I had a really deep obsession with ABC Family Christmas movies, not Hallmark Christmas movies. Or Lifetime Christmas movies. I very specifically loved this brand of like Jenny Garth, ABC Family, Melissa Joan Hart Christmas movies. And I immediately walked in and I was like, oh my gosh, I have the perfect story. And I was like, there's this spoiled rich boy and he bought an island and he got sent here and now he's miserable. But there's this really hot local who loves to chop wood. And my friends were like, please shut up. This went on for days. We were there for days. We were tubing. We were going to the movies. I was like, oh my God, they go to the movies. And they were like, please, we're done. We can't have any more of this. And I actually, I'm 25 now. I was 16 then. I have told so many people about this hypothetical holiday Christmas movie that I so desperately wanted to be made. And then when COVID hit, I was sorely out of a job, and I was stuck home, and I really, really wanted a comfort project. I just wanted something that was completely for me, that would be really fun and enjoyable. And instead of, calling up the movie producers I have on speed dial, speed dial. I don't think we have speed dial anymore.
But I
Yeah.
liked that.
Thank you. I was like, I'll write it as a novel. And so I decided to do that, and I got to cement it forever. And I dedicated this book to my best friend Tara, whose cabin we went to. Well, not her cabin, her grandmother's cabin. And so yeah, I think the other part of the question you were referring to, can you remind me of what the other part
The
of
small business part.
I'm not sure.
Okay, well, I'll get to that in a second, because
Sure.
the last thing is like, so for people who don't know, you wrote this book before you wrote Never Been Kissed.
Yes.
So this was actually your first book, the one that got you the book deal.
Oh, yes.
And then Never Been Kissed came after, which I think is a fascinating story as
Yeah.
well. Yeah.
So my editor at Sourcebooks had put out a tweet about how she was like really desperate for Happiest Season from Dan Levy's character's perspective. And I had just written this book. Well, what became this book? It was called Over the River and Through the Woods at that time. But I had just written that, and I remember emailing my agent and being like, we just need to get this to her. And she actually read it over Christmas that year, and right after New Year's sent the email telling me that I had a book deal, and I thought that was really cool. I guess because holiday romance can be a little bit more niche, although thank you all for coming. I really appreciate that. They wanted another book that would be kind of a little bit more broad, a little bit more for all seasons. And so I pitched a rom-com set at a drive-in movie theater, and I got to write that, and that became my debut. But this is also kind of my debut.
Yeah.
So I like to joke that Never Been Kissed was my sweet, and this is my sassy. So it's a little bit like a Sour Patch Kid. It's like sour, sweet.
Yeah.
Gone.
I like that. And then it's done.
Yep.
And then you have a third book coming out. So we'll get
I won't be gone. Yeah.
And I think my small business question, and I'm so sorry, Roan, for asking all these obsessive questions, but I just love this book. Is so in creating Wind River as a place, like what made you decide to focus on, that place, and then creating this story about the small businesses there and the sense of community, because that was so prevalent in the book.
Yeah. Well, I think all of my favorite holiday romance movies have the small town element to them. It's always like big city person goes to small town and changes their ways or learns this beautiful lesson. And so I think I don't see a lot of queer folk in those stories very often, or, they already live in the small town. And so I think my thought process there was that I think there's also kind of a misconception that small town can be an unfriendly or unwelcome place to LGBTQ folk. And so one of the things that you'll find out if you read You're a Mean One, Matthew Prince, is that Wind River, like Matthew arrives there and stumbles into a pride flag crosswalk, and he finds out that they have an LGBTQ support group, and that his grandparents are these, lovely, liberal, supportive folk. And so, and he doesn't necessarily get that kind of affirmation at home. And so I really wanted to create this small town that was like bustling with a coffee shop that, is not a Starbucks, much to Matthew's chagrin, but still has this like homey vibe. And it's a relationship to his sense of place that he doesn't get in New York City.
Yeah. Well, that was very nicely described.
Thanks.
And I'm just curious, Roan, for you, because your book takes place in a small town in Maine and then also in New Orleans. Like what went into creating those two settings, or why did you choose those two settings?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I love a small town setting also. And as Timothy was saying, I think sometimes there's this idea, I feel like this is kind of a leftover from the 90s idea, but these things, it's like they always last 30 years longer than they should. Like this idea that if you are queer, you have to like leave your small town and go to a big city, or at least go to a college or someplace that's like for you, quote unquote. And I love reading about queer people in small towns, trans people in small towns, people of color in small towns, because it's like, no, actually, in order to change the way those small towns go, it actually takes fewer people to completely take over with our queer agenda. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, it's like, there can be so many homes there. And so in The Holiday Trap, one of my characters, Greta, lives in this small town in Maine. And for her, it's really claustrophobic. But it's not really just because it's a small town. It's because she has this family that's very kind of over involved. And I think so often there's that feeling that like, I want to get away from my family. So I have to like go 800 miles away, go to a different city. And sometimes you just need to like find yourself and then you can return to your small town. Sometimes some people don't ever leave. And I think that's so awesome. And it's always a delight when I go to small towns to walk into a place and be like, there's the gays are already here. This is excellent.
I was going to say
Yeah.
that I think we actually now have this in common because Garnet Run, your Harlequin series, is also an incredibly queer small town. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure.
Because you just put out the fourth,
Fourth.
the fourth and
Yeah.
final, Garnet Run book.
Yeah, so the fourth. So I have this series called Garnet Run, and it's set in a small town in Wyoming that I fabricated to be like the queerest small town in the Middle West. So everyone in the books is queer, like all the main characters, all the secondary characters. There are a few people whose gender and sexuality are not stated, so they're just like queer by default, as everyone assumes. But yeah, it's like I had so many people write to me and be like, is this a real town? How do I get there? Where can I go? Like, are there people for me? And there really was, I think, a deep longing from people, like a nostalgia, a longing for like the ability to have that small town life, but not the sort of like social political stuff that we assume sometimes goes along with it. And that's why I said it in Wyoming, is I wanted to be like, well, I mean, there's no reason why there can't be a completely queer small town in Wyoming. Like, can make it happen. And I'm being flip about it, but really like, before I was born, my grandparents, so my family's Jewish. And when my grandparents wanted to like rent a summer cabin back in the 50s, basically the people who owned the entire like 30 home area were like, I mean, we'll rent to you if you can get 29 other Jewish families, because once you rent here, we won't be able to rent the other houses to people who aren't Jewish. And this is the 50s. And so they got together and they invited basically friends, family, people. They're from New York, so they knew a lot of people, and they rented out all 30 homes. And so this little place in the Poconos became this like Jewish small town, but only because of prejudice, right? It wasn't like an attempt to self-ghettoize or a desire to keep people out. It was like, we will only rent to you if you can fill up everything. And I think that's like, that still happens in a sort of less explicit way, like redlining and just, yeah. So I love writing small towns where there's a lot of diversity, a lot of different kinds of people can be there, because that's how it should be. Yeah.
I was also a shameless plug for Roan's other book. If you binge your way through our holiday books, Roan also has a holiday book from last year called The Lights on Knockbridge Lane, and it is excellent. I really love that book, so I can't wait to reread it this year.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, what about you, Alison? Is there like, what is your fantasy small town? What's the draw? What are we all doing here?
So like, I don't know why I love reading small town books, but I am not drawn to like writing small town books as much. So like Kisser Ones for me takes place in Portland. I mean, it also takes place like on Mount Hood and is very rural, and there's a cabin. But that's really secluded, so it's not a small town. And so I tend to like gravitate more towards, I think, writing about cities. What I would love to write is just a suburban book, right? Like no one writes books about, I live in the suburbs, right? So like, and I'm not ashamed of that. Like I love living in the suburbs. Like there's a Target really close by, and like, it's so easy and convenient, and it's close to my family.
So you want to make the suburbs sexy.
I would like to make the suburbs sexy. I would like to write like queer suburban romance. That's my actual dream. But I live right outside of Portland. And so I set this book in Portland, which is also just a space that like feels so inherently queer. Like everything about Portland is a very like queer, welcoming space. And so I enjoyed writing about that.
I was going to say, I mean, related to those things is that I love both in Charm and Kisser Ones for me that you tie pivotal romantic moments to settings that feel loaded to the emotional stakes there. And I also have kind of a dual question here, is because both of my novels are set in fictional towns because I'm not good at geography. And so I just like to be like, there's a tree farm here. And they can drive to it. But we've both written fictional towns. And so I'm wondering, what is the draw for tethering characters, fictional characters, to a very real place? And then what's the draw to tethering fictional characters to fictional places?
I mean, honestly, I think I can't keep track of fictional places. Like, I think it's just like from a practical standpoint. I'm like, oh, Portland is real. I can describe real place. I mean, I made up a couple things, but like for the most part, like I have something to work with and I don't have to keep something fake in my brain. But I also like in Charm, the characters travel to a whole bunch of different places. And like, those are all places that I've been and I love travel. And so I think for me, like setting things in real like putting characters that I've created into real settings. I don't know. I just really enjoy it, especially if they can be like, I think travel is the number one thing I have in all of my books. Like someone is always traveling somewhere. And in Kiss Her Once, for me, it's only to a cabin, like an hour outside of Portland. But yeah.
Yeah.
What about you, Roan?
You know, I love both. So I think most of my books before the Garnet Run series and Holiday Trap were set in cities, or at least partly in cities. And I love cities. I love the country. And I think for me, it's about wanting to evoke a place that could feel real. And it doesn't really matter if it is real and it's someplace that people have been to 50 times and they're like, oh my God, I know that coffee shop that you're talking about. Or if it's like someone looking at what I've written and being like, wait, is this real?
Mhm.
Like, that's what I'm always, if it's a real place, I want people to be like, yes, I know it. If it's a fake place, I want people to be like, yes, I know it.
Mhm.
And so I feel like it draws on the same descriptors. It's just about like, how much control do I want to have over the environment? And sometimes with a city, it's fun because it's like, everything about cities to me is inconvenient in a great way sometimes, but also like, I mean, if you live in a city, you become very familiar with inconvenience. And so it's a great plot point to set things in cities because you can miss the bus or the train or the trolley anytime. You can get shot on by a bird. You can get hit by like someone throws a coffee out the thing. There's just like at any point you can be like, I don't know what to have happen next in the scene. I'll just make everything very uncomfortable and awkward for my character.
Yeah.
And in a small town, because you made it up, you can just find the analog to that. So like, someone gets hit by a donut out of a car window, but like the person was actually trying to give them a donut because they were like, hey, want a donut? It's the small town version of that. So yeah, I like both.
Yeah.
Really.
I love that. I love that you just talked about making your characters as uncomfortable as possible. I feel like one of my favorite things to write in Matthew Prince was Matthew has a little bit of a running joke that Hector really, really hates his Gucci boots. He like loves these really impractical, fashionable Gucci boots. And in the real town that I visited in the Berkshires, you could not walk most places. You did need to get into a car, but I made this in like an entirely walkable town where Matthew like could not get on a bus. Like he needed to, and he doesn't have any practical shoes. And so he's slipping and sliding and falling and landing. And I think there's just so much joy in being like, wow, he had so much pride in these boots when he arrived. And now he's like, gotta buy some Timberlands or something.
Gotta put him through that struggle. Yeah. Donut in the face, bad shoes. It's why I liked the awkward meet cute, the caroling meet cute. You got to put the characters in uncomfortable positions to see how they react and like what they do.
Yeah. And I think actually now that you asked this great question, I'm thinking about it. It's like, there's the everyone knows you of a small town that creates a certain kind of discomfort, shame if you do something because someone saw you who knows you and is going to tell everyone. But then in a big city, it's like nobody knows you, but everybody sees you. And so you can in your mind make up like definitely 100 people saw me trip just now. In reality, like, yeah, they probably did, but nobody cares.
Right.
But there's the same feeling of like self-surveillance. I think like you can convince yourself that everybody sees you and is watching you in a big town, a big city, just the way everyone actually sometimes is in a small town. And I feel like that awkwardness and discomfort sometimes create like the most pivotal interactions, scenes. They like catalyze things. So yeah.
I was actually going to say that I think Matthew Prince is kind of a good example of the opposite of that, because Matthew is used to being a Twitter hashtag. That's like where he starts the book, is being like very under this microscopic lens. He's doing terrible things for his generalized anxiety disorder. And then he gets to this small town and he realizes like, these people don't care about me at all. They don't care about money. They don't care about fame. They don't care that I have this gorgeous, apartment overlooking Central Park. They care about connection and small business and personal relationships. And Matthew, up until this point, hasn't even really had those. And so he's literally forced to, for the first time, set aside the Gucci boots and the hashtags. I mean, he has no service, so I mean, he can't get on Twitter anyway. But he's forced to set those things aside to actually make personal connections, which
cool. Yeah.
you know, I think it's kind of it was fun to explore in the book.
Yeah, I liked that element of the book because it felt so like a Christmas movie to me. You know what I mean? Like the idea of like leaving that one environment, the city environment, like for this journey of self-discovery in a small town that felt so like inherently a Hallmark Christmas movie. I just loved it. And so, which kind of makes me want to know, like, for both of you, like, we know a little bit, Tim, for you, why Christmas books? What is the draw of writing aside from ABC Family? Which honestly, I love that. ABC Family doesn't even exist anymore, right? It's like
it's freeform.
It's freeform now.
Yeah, it's edgy now. Yeah. But back then they were making these, I mean, this is a shameless plug for Melissa Joan Hart now, but
Love it.
I mean, they were making these bonkers Christmas movies like Holiday in Handcuffs. Are you familiar? Oh, yeah. I'm very thrilled. There were so many nods at that. I watch that movie every single Christmas. And there is a gay character in that movie. He's a side character, but he plays the brother. And Snow Globe, starring Christina Milian, where she just gets stuck in a snow globe.
What?
That is bonkers to me. And so when I sat down to write a Christmas book, I was like, I want to write a Christmas book that feels absurd. I mean, the opening line of this book is like, I bought an island. So what? I mean, nobody in our right mind buys an island. And so I think the appeal is that everything is so overblown at the holidays that these characters can, you know, lose their balance on a patch of ice and land into each other. And it could be this like hot erotic moment, but like at a regular time of the year, that would be like, okay, get off me right now, you know? Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. I feel like there's this magic around the holidays that's like a magic about kindness and like people. Living in Philly, I feel like there's that time of year, suddenly you're like at the trolley stop, and instead of like spitting at your feet, the person is like, oh, a person's here, and is like, hey. And that's magical in comparison to like having someone spit at your feet. So yeah, I feel like people are like a little bit more aware of themselves vis-a-vis other people, wanting to make connections, wanting to like get in the spirit, whatever that means. And like in the holiday trap, there actually isn't very much Christmas. I forgot this, and I someone tagged me in a review that was like, I was expecting a lot of Christmas for this Christmas book, but there wasn't any. And I was like, it's a holiday book, bitches. No one said Christmas. There's Hanukkah, it's cool. But yeah, I think that the magic for me is like there's kindness, people want to feel loved, and they like give love in some attempt to get it back. And maybe that's cynical, but like I feel like I see it even in retail exchange at the holidays. Like I used to work retail, and someone would buy something, and around the holidays, if you were like happy holidays, they were like, thank you, happy holidays. And it's like a pause to remember that you're a person, which is great. But also I think it's a time that is so stressful for many of us, like family and gifts and money and pets and kids and divorce, and like there's a lot of expectation, there's a lot of tradition. And so to me, any book where you're like interacting with a person who might be your future conjures up these notions of like, who was your past? And your past is your family of origin, your traditions growing up with them. And like a holiday book gives you the chance to create a new set of traditions, a new dynamic around the holidays, and like to do it the way you want instead of the way your parents wanted. And there's something to me that's just like really magical about that.
Oh, I completely failed to mention too that I'm a December baby. So Christmas is just like, I bleed red tinsel, you know? But what was fun about writing this book was that Matthew is a Grinch, and he has set aside his Christmas loving ways. And so for me, I was like, as someone who's like, Thanksgiving is like, Mariah is now on, you know? She's here, she's risen. It was kind of an exploration of that. But Alison, what about for you? What made you, so Kiss Her Once for me takes place around Christmas, but would you call it a Christmas book?
I mean, yeah, I think it's a Christmas book. I'm going to be the weirdo again. And I didn't actually set out to write a holiday book or a Christmas book at all. I just set out to write a queer version of the Sandra Bullock classic, While You Were Sleeping, because I had to come up with an idea very quickly to pitch to my agent. I had no ideas because I had just sold my first book, and I thought that I had no creativity left in me. And so I went back to that, one of my absolute favorite rom-coms of all time, and was playing around with the idea of like telling a story about, you know, I mean, in my original draft, there were like comas involved, like it was a whole thing. It's very different from the movie While You Were Sleeping in its current form. But yeah, I was just like, I'm going to play around with that. Cause like Bill Pullman looks so great in those like flannel Carhartt combos, like a Portland Butch lesbian. Like that's my story right there. Her name is Jack. Like it's done. And then I was like, oh, well, that takes place at the holidays. So I guess my book takes place at the holiday. Like it was literally, I put no thought into it. I was just like, I have to write a holiday book because it's While You Were Sleeping. And so that kind of just happened, I would say mostly like tangentially to wanting to write about Bill Pullman. And so, yeah, that's kind of how it came into fruition. So I didn't set out to write a holiday book. I didn't think about all the fun things I would be able to do with a holiday book. I just kind of discovered all of that like throughout the writing process.
Have you tweeted at Bill Pullman that he is your ideal lesbian?
I have not. I mean, like I am not good on Twitter. So I would love for Bill Pullman to know that. And I would love for him to do marketing for my book. Really, you know, I think now he's got like the salt and pepper thing happening. But no, we have not been in contact as of yet. So yeah, but yeah, he is the ideal lesbian in that movie. I mean, like he like makes wood furniture, like it's perfect. Yeah, he's got that that floppy hair. So good. It is. It's just like it's perfect. Yeah.
What do you think? Should we ask if other people have questions? Should we do a game? What are we doing?
Yeah.
Let's see what the questions are in the audience. We would love to hear lots. Yeah, right up front here.
So I'm part of the city's Queering the Narrative book club. Fantastic. Close to that. And one of the questions that we end most of our meetings with is, what do you want to see more of? So I'm curious for all of you, whether specifically in the like holiday romance world or just broader like queer media, what do you want to see more of?
I love that. And for people at home, the question was like, what do we want to see more of in queer romance and queer media? Fantastic question. You want to go first?
Me?
Yeah, it's your
Loaded
night.
question.
It's
Yeah.
your special occasion.
I mean, I think talking a little bit about Your Mean One, Matthew Prince, there is an author's note at the top of this book that talks a lot about how there are on the page discussions of generalized anxiety disorders and panic or anxiety attacks. And I think mental health representation in general is so rarely talked about in fiction, but also probably even rarer because there's less queer romance in the world, but like less queer romance that actually addresses the mental health struggles that queer folk can experience, independent of their identity as well. And if you want to rec for that, Alison Cochran's The Charm Offensive also has some amazing mental health rep in it. And so I think I would love to see a normalization of that experience, and so that we can have open discussions about it and it not feel like an addendum.
I think one of the things that I always think of with like what I want to see more of is I just want to see more. And you mentioned Happiest Season earlier. And I remember when Happiest Season came out, like all my hopes and dreams were pinned on that movie. Like it had to be everything. It had to be like perfectly tailored to me. And I like had such high hopes for it. And I think that happens when we only get like one queer movie a year, versus like if we could just have more access to queer representation, then we can just have bad queer movies. I mean, not that Happiest Season is bad, but like we can have like I don't want to start a war.
So mad about it.
I don't want to be controversial here. Let's not talk about Happiest Season, but in general, like we can have media that we don't connect with, and that's okay. It doesn't feel like that was our one chance to have something that we connected with. And in terms of like romance as a genre, I hope that we get to see, because I feel like we've had this big boom of like queer love stories with characters who are cis, but like stories and FF stories. And I would love to see more trans characters. Anita Kelly's book, Love and Other Disasters, like was a really successful, great book with a non-binary protagonist. And I know like KT Hoffman, I think that's right, has a trans baseball book. I don't know if y'all have heard about this. It's called The Keystone Combination. Yeah, like if you're in publishing, like you're super excited about it. But it's about a trans main character and like on a baseball team, so it's like a sports romance. And I'm just looking forward to more access to like trans stories. and just gender expansive stories within romance.
Yeah, totally agree. I would love to see some more genre mashup queer books. Selfishly, just because I personally am writing them and I'm a fan of reading them, but like in general, I think everyone would benefit. Yeah, I feel like there is so much amazing stuff that queer rom-coms are able to do that I found that there's some resistance to in like romance, like genre romance. I feel like rom-coms are able to have a little bit more of a different structure. They don't have to follow the same beats. And with genre romance, like obviously you can do anything you want. But if you're trying to be traditionally published, there's a little bit more of an expected structure. And it's a structure that I think sometimes doesn't suit queer stories because like queer temporality is different than heterosexual temporality, and the things that are happening at a certain point in your life are not the same. And there isn't this like, I did all my playing around in my 20s and now I'm 30 and I'm ready for a relationship. Sometimes it's like, now I'm 40 and I like came out 3 days ago. And so there's just like, I think there's a lot that rom-coms can do that's different temporally than what genre romance can do. And the same goes for like horror or sci-fi or fantasy or mystery. And I would be so excited to see more like romance, other genre hybrids that allow queer characters to like murder people and catch murderers. And I don't know why I started with murder people, but you know what I mean. But yeah, just like
Do you have a secret?
No secrets here. Definitely not. You didn't hear it here first. Nope. Yeah. So genre. I want all the genres.
Yeah, I love that you said that too, because I was thinking a lot about this when I wrote my debut, Never Been Kissed, about how like we queer folk don't necessarily follow the same relationship timeline that our straight peers do. And so a lot of times fiction is one of the ways we get to explore alternate timelines for ourselves. And you mentioned like genre romance. I recently I'm going to be writing 3 like high heat genre romances for Harlequin. So there'll be mass market paperback novels with like lots of steamy scenes, and queer folk have such a different relationship to our bodies and to sex. And I mean, I saw that most recently. I went to see Bros in theaters with Billy Eichner, and there's this like really long, extended, awkward sex scene of them just like doing like everything under the sun. And it's so fun to see that represented back at you, because you're like, okay, maybe I'm a little embarrassed, but did that on Friday. And so I think there's, like you said, there's such an expansive palette for us in fiction to be able to explore queerness as not a monolith, but as seeds of independent experience. Yeah.
Awesome. That was an amazing question.
Yeah,
Who
thank
else
you.
has a question for us? Yeah, right up front.
Are on the spectrum, like wherever they decide that is. How do you approach that? And did you find it hard sell when you're talking to kind of traditionally published romance books? Because there is like a lot of ace romance as far as like ace writing goes, which is like kind of surprising. Like when you look at it proportionally, there like couldn't be more of ace characters. So anyway, what's like your process and like how do you approach it?
Well, so in writing, oh yeah, I'm so sorry. The question for those of you who are at home, was about the writing ace characters or characters on the ace spectrum, in romance, and just kind of talking about the process and how that came to be. And so for me in writing The Charm Offensive specifically, I actually did not set out to write Charlie as being like a demisexual character, which is how I like he doesn't identify on the page in the book, but is how I feel he identifies in my interpretation. And I didn't set out to do that, because that was like me as I was writing the book, like coming to understand my own demisexual identity. So I like wrote all these scenes where he was like having these conversations and like explaining his sexuality, and like, you know, they were my own experiences. And then I was like, oh my gosh, is this character demisexual? Like, am I demisexual? Whoa. And I didn't have any pushback in writing that character. Like, honestly, we like never had a conversation about it. Me and my publisher, I was at times worried they didn't read that part, or like they didn't know. And I was like, you're fine with this? Okay, cool. Let's just go. But yeah, for me, so in writing that book, it was really just organic as I was exploring my own identity, especially because I wrote the book originally just like for myself, like for funsies. And so I was like, I can do whatever I want. I'm not trying to sell this. And then I will say, in Kiss Her Once for Me, the main character is also demisexual, but she was not in like all the early drafts of the book, because I kind of thought like, because I'd already written a demi book, I couldn't write another one. Like it was somehow like, oh, checked off that identity, like can't go back. And then as I was like writing the book, I was like, wait, like if I'm Demi and I'm writing this character, like I can do whatever I want. I can always have characters on the asexual spectrum. And again, no one has said anything about it, so I'm assuming it's fine. It's just not been an issue or a conversation with my publisher.
I would say too. So funny story. So Alison and I actually met through a Facebook writers group before we were published. So we both had book deals, but we were looking for writing partners to hold us accountable because we're not great at that. And neither of us knew we were writing demisexual heroes both at the same time. And, it took a couple of weeks to months before we were like, wait. And so, they came out pretty far apart, but we were working on them, in tandem kind of. And I think when I was writing Ren and Never Been Kissed, I wrote a character who had not had his first kiss, was obsessed with movies, had internalized the Nora Ephron romantic timeline. We meet, we kiss, we fall in love, we get married, we do all this stuff. And I wrote chapter 1. I was like, great. I wrote chapter 2. I was like, great. I wrote chapter 3 and I was like, oh, he's demisexual. And then I wrote chapter 4 and was like, oh, he doesn't know. And so I had to go back and kind of sit with this character more and find out, his experience. And through that, I was also kind of learning more about demisexuality and the ace spectrum and mapping that onto my life and my experiences and how I relate to sexual attraction. And similarly, I mean, my editor is lovely and a part of the LGBTQ community. So she was very, very supportive of me writing a character on the ace spectrum. And I think there are a lot of champions in publishing who know that there are readers out there that need those books. And so I will say that the more you buy them and read them and request them at your libraries and post about them on Bookstagram, the more publishers are actually really responding to that. If you make a book talk hashtag like ace books, like I can tell you publishers are reading that feed and being like, oh, there's a hunger for this. And I think that's wonderful.
Yeah, also weird. Same. I also learned that I was demi from writing books a while back, and I was like, oh, this is interesting. And I also wrote a demisexual character named Charlie. What is happening?
Oh my gosh,
I mean, he's a dude, but yeah, like
no, my Charlie
Oh,
is
yours
also
is
a dude.
too?
Yeah, in my first book. Yeah.
Well,
Also
gosh.
dude Charlie.
What is every Charlie demisexual?
Probably. I think
Did
that's
we
what we can now
discover
conclude.
something
All the
amazing?
fictional ones at least.
The fictional
right?
ones?
Yeah.
Charlie in the Chocolate Factory.
Definitely.
Yep, got it.
It's
Perfect.
so obvious.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think actually like talking romance, I think is the best place to talk about being on any spectrum, right? Like the ace spectrum is like, because romance is the only genre where the relationship, the romantic relationship, the sexual relationship, the whatever your version of that kind of relationship are, is the purposeful center of the story. And I think that it means that like no identity is ever incidental because it has bearing. Because if you are connecting with another human being, hopefully you are like bringing all of yourself to that relationship, and so are they. And so I think in romance especially, there's so much space to talk about all of those things because the characters have to know them about one another. And I think sometimes by putting them in conversation, the character whose point of view you're in learns those things about themselves the same way that maybe we learn about ourselves through writing them. And I just like cannot second enough the fact that y'all have so much power here. Like publishers, editors are trolling TikTok looking for like, what do people want? What do the people want? How can we make publishing predictable? How do we know what will sell? And like, the more you say what you want, the more these editors are seriously like, I can take to acquisitions this TikTok or hashtag or whatever and be like, there is a market for this and I can prove it to you. And it's like, it's turned publishing into a faster wheel. I think like the feedback loop has closed and has gotten faster. So Book Talk and Instagram and all of these things, like they actually set an agenda that publishers are not following instead of the other way around. And that is like a huge amount of power in the hands of people who review books, who buy books, etc. So like figure out whatever you want to see and like get people together and make it happen because they are really listening.
Are there any other audience questions?
So since you published your first book, how do you feel like mentally you've like not changed, but kind of dealt with it? But like, obviously, like your day to day doesn't have to change that much because, you know, you have your job and, you know, you're whatever, but mentally, like, how do you feel like you changed?
Yeah, so the question is, after you publish a book, are there ways that you feel mentally that you have changed?
I can answer this because I started substitute teaching this year, and I was in the classroom like 2 weeks ago with some sophomores and like was straight up getting some like mean girl bullying vibes. I was like, you know, and there were also some dudes who were like, these were some interesting sophomores is the point of the story. But basically, like in my teaching career, I did not have that thick of skin. Stuff like that would totally bother me. Or I'd be like, okay, like what did I do? Do I need to change something? And instead, all these sophomores were being snarky and stuff. And I was like, I don't care. I've been tagged in mean reviews on Instagram. Like I got thick skin now. Like I can handle this. Like what? They're going to make fun of what I'm wearing. Great. Like seems justified. It's fine. You know, I was just able to like blow it off. So I think like the first book is really brutal. At least it was for me on my mental health. And just like all the pressure of being seen and having people read your work. But I would say that I'm feeling this time around a little bit more like, you know, I got this. It's fine. And so that's kind of been my experience.
I was going to say, your question made me think a little bit that being traditionally published comes with some bit of financial stability in the sense that you get to pursue your passion in a way that is kind of funded underneath you. And there's a luxury and a curse in that, specifically, like I think we were just talking about, you know, with asexuality and how you're sitting with these characters and you're learning about yourself. You're basically on a contract and it's like, you're going to sit down and you're going to learn about yourself and you're going to be paid to do that. And it might not be always comfortable. And so I think specifically for me, writing You're a Mean One, Matthew Prince, I had always had a really strong, hard battle with anxiety, but I never thought to speak to anyone about that. And I finished writing this book and was like, I need to talk to someone. And that was really like my kick in the ass to be like, get yourself together, like learn more about, and Matthew goes through a growth in the book that says, I can't put this off any longer. I want to live my best true life. Then I'm going to seek the help that I need. And I was able to do that through exploring a fictional character's experience. And I think that changes you mentally because it helps you expand your world beyond the walls of your actual circumstances. And yeah, I'm just happy to be on Zoloft.
Also a shameless plug for Zoloft now.
I know.
Yeah, gosh. I think for me, it sort of it like made me feel more valid about all the weird things that I already did regularly, which was like smell a lot of things, touch a lot of things, overhear conversations in cafes and be like, I'm going to listen to the way that person talks, because suddenly now I was like, it's research. It's all research. Everything's fine. It's research. And it was like such a simple mind shift. But once I started like paying better attention, because I was like, oh, I want to be able to pull some stuff from like life or from other people, or then I started just paying more attention in general. And I think that when I would go to write, I had like better sense memory than I ever did before, because I was not only paying attention, but I was like paying attention to paying attention. I guess that's mindfulness. I don't know. I'm bad at it, but I do like sit down to write dialogue and I'm trying to think like, oh, well, how do people actually talk? Allow me to load the conversation that I heard on the bus the other day, or like, what does a bird actually feel like? I don't know. I guess I better go touch one. You know, all these things. And I think that like, it's a very, maybe like superficial answer, but it really did make me just like pay attention to everything, because suddenly everything felt like this very fecund ground for like making a story. Or I would see people and be like, oh, if I were going to write that character, like what's my one sentence description, or how does their book start, or like those kinds of things. And it, if nothing else, it has made like waiting in line at the DMV more interesting and more useful. Yes. Yeah. Sure. Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you for asking. Does anyone else have a question? Do we have time for more questions?
Yeah, I think we saw
Okay.
some in the, oh,
Yeah,
yep, in the
right here.
third row there. Yeah. Mhm. Mm. Yeah. So the question was about how does it feel to write books about Hanukkah or other holidays and have them not considered like holiday romance, or have people be like upset that there isn't Christmas in them. And it's actually not the first time it's happened. I've written a couple other books that where Hanukkah was the major holiday, and one book of mine, the remaking of Corbin Whale, is like, there is no Christmas. It is fully a Hanukkah book. And I would still get people being like, what's that Christmas book you wrote at the coffee shop? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't have a Christmas book at a coffee shop. And they're like, no, with the this and the that. And I'm like, oh, you must mean my Hanukkah book. I'm not really that much of an asshole, but yeah, it sucks. I mean, I think it's like, if you're any religion other, I mean, I'm not religious, but if you're culturally any religion other than Christian in the US, I think you're probably like from childhood pretty used to like, nobody knows that it's your holiday. Nobody cares that it's, because it's a Wednesday, or like you don't get work or school off for it. We used to time shift Hanukkah in my family like to winter break whenever it was, because that's the only time people were off work. So it's like, it's something that I'm very used to personally, but I do think that like for other people, younger people who aren't kind of as like cynical about it as I am, my little sister, I remember when we would go to the mall as kids and people would wish her happy or Merry Christmas, she would be like, but Happy Hanukkah? And they're like, what? Okay, next, whatever. Not to be mean, just like people weren't thinking about it. And I think that's why it's so important to have just like some awareness about the language that we use. So often people are just like, it's just fastness. I think it's like, there's no malice, it's speed, that people are looking for a way to shorthand things to make it easier to make a grouping that's useful on social media. And I think it's like, we just have to break the habit, right? We just have to be like, yes, it's slightly more inconvenient to write holiday than Christmas, I guess, if that's not your gut instinct, but like, it's not a difficult switch to make. It just requires some attention and some intentionality. And I think the more books that we get, and I would love, I mean, I feel like there are actually a lot of Hanukkah romances compared to like non-Christian or Jewish holidays, of which there are many. And I like am blanking on, I feel like there's like one book that I can think of that I can't even remember the title of, but there just aren't that many. And so we need more of them. We need places like indie bookstores, big bookstores like Barnes and Noble. Like, we need to have not just a Christmas end cap, we need to have like a holiday romances or all these things. And like, that doesn't mean you can't also have a Christmas one, but I think we're in a moment where people are like real threatened about specificity or something. I don't know what's going on, but yeah, it sucks. I wish we would stop and let's publish more books about all the holidays.
Do we have time to take one more question? Short answer. Love it. We got this.
Last minute shameless plug for your novels you've read.
I just read She Gets the Girl. Oh, sorry. The question was like shameless plugs, queer books you've recently read. I just finally read She Gets the Girl by Rachel Lippincott and Alison Derrick, and it was amazing. Sure.
This book doesn't come out until spring of 2023, so I'm very sorry, but Anita Kelly's Something Wild and Wonderful about two queer folk walking the Pacific Coast Trail together. It's beautiful, it's wonderful, and it's going to make you cry. So,
well, I'm going to make this real short because I can't remember a single book that I've read or the title of anything.
Love it. Done.
Okay. Fantastic. I'll just slide in right here, pretend like I'm a part of this. So thank you everyone for joining us tonight. We are now going to transition to our signing line. So if you all wouldn't mind picking up your chairs, setting them to the side, and giving us just a moment so that we can get out our little signing table. And if you have books that you'd like to sign or purchase, we have them over by our info desk, and you can grab them, have them signed up here, and then purchase them on your way out. Thank you all so much for being here tonight. We really, really appreciate it. Thank you.